The basic core group is here, so great. Let's go ahead and get started. It's 6:01, October the 20th, 2020. I will call this regular meeting of the Mantua Springs City Council to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if the city clerk would please display the American flag. Join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, and if the city clerk would please call the roll.
Yes. Council members Edith Chandler,
Present.
John Shada,
Here.
Julie Wolf, okay.
Hear me?
Yeah, now I can.
Now we can.
Susan Mulbrick,
Here.
Steve Bremner,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Nancy Fortune,
Present.
and Mayor John Graham.
Here. Great, thank you. Okay, first item is the approval of the agenda. I believe you all had a copy of the agenda. So I'd entertain a motion in a second to approve. Councilor Wolf, motion. We have a second.
Second.
We have a second by Councilor Chandler. All in favor of approving the agenda as written, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next item is public comment on non-agenda items. Judy, do we have anyone wishing to speak to a non-agenda item tonight?
Well, if we can just announce to our visiting public here, if they do have a question, if they use the raise hand tool, and that way I would know that they would like to speak. But at this moment, I do not have any hands that are raised.
Let's give them just a little bit here. 15 attendees. Okay, I guess we don't have any takers for non-agenda item commentary. Okay, let's move on to item F, the consent calendar. We have 4 items on tonight's consent calendar. The first is a review of the warrants through September 2020. The second and third items are approval of the September 15th and October 6th, 2020 regular meeting minutes, respectively. And the fourth item is approval of Whitney Lewis as an alternate member of the City Planning Commission. If there are no objections, I'd entertain a motion to approve and accept. Councilor Wolf, I believe we have a motion there. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second, Councilor Chandler. Thank you. Okay, all in favor of accepting the agenda as written, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. The next item of business is our new human resources policies, changes to that. And I believe that Mr. Parker was going to speak to that.
Yes, I'm just having a little connectivity problem getting the agenda up here. Give me 1 second if you don't mind.
Yeah, it happens to all of us.
I usually have this ahead of time, but for some reason I can't pull it up. I'll probably be about 20 seconds here. I apologize. Okay, so yeah, I appreciate that. So your HR department put together with my review some new policies to deal with new legislation that was passed by Colorado General Assembly. The first one, I believe, is on page, actually I don't have the page number, 39 of your packet. It deals with a bill that was passed in June of this year. It's called the Healthy Families and Workplaces Act. My office provided a memo to the City Council on this legislation back Yeah, I don't know what is going on with my computer here. I apologize. It's just stalling out completely. I'm going to just go to another screen. I'm sorry. I usually have good internet here. Just went totally blank. I apologize. Anyway, I provided a memo to the city council explaining the new legislation, which is the Healthy Family and Workplaces Act. It basically has three aspects to it. The first one is it requires that you provide sick leave to all your employees at a rate of 1 hour for every 30 hours they work, up to a maximum of 48 hours. That goes into effect on January 1, 2021. So it's not in effect right now, but we want to get this policy in place in time for January 2021. It also provides for supplemental sick leave during a public health emergency, which is approximately 80 hours of sick leave for employees. If you just give me one more second, I'm going to get to the right part of my computer here. I've got this in two places, so I apologize for this. I don't know what is going on here. It's got a mind of its own tonight. Yeah, and then the third part of the law, which actually was in effect back in June, was a requirement that employers in Colorado provide their employees with the leave that's required by the Federal Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act under the Family First Coronavirus Relief Act. That doesn't change what you do because you already are covered. You already have to provide that benefit. So as a public employer, it doesn't really make any difference. So the first policy that you have basically lays out when the leave can be taken under the new legislation, how it applies to employees, just sort of lays it out so it's basically covered as part of your personnel policies. Do you have any questions on the first document?
Counselors, do you have any questions for Mr. Parker at this point? I guess not. Maybe we'll spring everything on you at the end there, Jeff.
That's great. My computer will hopefully be up and running.
Okay.
The second policy, I'm going to get to that now, is complies with the new public health emergency whistleblower law. And so what this policy does is it basically provides protections for an employee or employees who have a complaint regarding the way an employer is basically violating any of the requirements dealing with health and safety protections for the employees. It basically provides a process for employers to review the complaint and for employees to be protected from any kind of retaliation for bringing a complaint in good faith. Really nothing too new. Employees in the city can always bring, complaints that are founded in good faith, and then the city will review them based upon the type of the complaint it is, and we'll have different reviews for different kinds of complaints. But this just makes it specific for the new legislation that was passed by the General Assembly. So that's the second policy. And then the third policy is a additional policy, which basically addresses how accrued sick leave gets calculated based upon the current handbook. So the current handbook doesn't exactly apply to the way these two new, I guess the first law, the Healthy Families Workplaces Act, works. So we made some revisions to the actual personnel manual itself to just be clear about what number of hours get worked by who and how they basically end up getting the leave that's required under these acts. So really, these are more just updates to comply with the law and make sure that employees who read the manual can basically see how the law works and what they're entitled to. Sorry to fumble through that a little bit. I apologize. I planned to have something to look at when I was talking to you.
No, that's fine. I think that's good. Council members, do you have questions for Mr. Parker? I guess not. And I guess it's fair to say that we pretty much don't have a choice in reviewing this. We accept it to comply with the law, is my understanding. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, that's correct. I mean, ultimately, you wouldn't have had to put them in your personnel manual or have policies if you didn't really want to, because the law applies anyways. But I think it's helpful for your manual to reflect what the law requires, so employees can read it, they can understand it. If they have any questions, they can come to you. Nobody gets confused that way. So, even though these laws are actually a little tricky and relatively confusing, to be honest. So.
Well, I found it confusing, so I'm glad that you agree.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Well, I recommended action on this agenda. My item is to approve the three items under this. So at this point, I could certainly entertain a motion. Mayor Pro Tem Fortune, we have a,
Sure. I move to approve public health emergency whistleblower law policy as presented and to update the employees handbook, section 7.4 sick leave as presented, and to approve the Manitou Springs Healthy Families and Workplace Act policy as presented.
do we have a second? We have a second from Counselor Wolf. Okay. We have motion to second to accept as presented. Do we have any further discussion or comments? Okay, it looks like we can go ahead and vote on this. All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand. Aye. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Parker.
Thank you.
Okay, next item of business is consideration of approval of the 2019 audit. Okay. And Denise, are you presenting that, or is it's Becca? Becca. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Becca is presenting and we're bringing over someone else. So there's two people.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh. Oh, there we are.
And Becca, are we bringing over?
Right.
the-
The auditor is Jim Hinkle of Hinkle and Company PC. He should be in the attendees. Do you see him?
We have one Jim, so I'm bringing this one Jim over. I'm hoping this is the right one. And who is the second person? Becca?
Just him. Just
Okay.
just Mr. Hinkle. So we're required by the city charter and also by state law to have our financials audited on a yearly basis. And the city went through an RFP process, and Hinkle and Company PC won the RFP process, or we chose them. They've been great to work with, and now Mr. Hinkle is going to present their findings.
Mr. Hinkle, you
Good
have the
evening,
floor.
and thank you very much for the opportunity to join you all for this evening's meeting. Hopefully I will be a little short and sweet. I'm going to share my screen here. And hopefully you all will be seeing. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. What you're seeing is a table of contents, and I'll kind of move over from there. We started the audit in what we call interim procedures. Those are the procedures that we perform before the actual financial statement audit occurs. And in those interim procedures, we evaluate and gain an understanding of the city's internal control structure with respect to the accounting department and the financial reporting. And we document those internal controls, and then we identify what we call the control features, what those points of contact in the internal control structure that acts as a control through the accounting process. Generally speaking, you have three phases of the recording a transaction, the initiation of a transaction, the approval, and then the recording in the general ledger. We selected a random sample of disbursements and of payroll transactions, and then we tested those control features such as approvals and account codings and supporting documentation to ensure that, number one, the the system was operating as it was described to us. And number two, that the control features are being effective in the process. We do this for two reasons. The first reason is to identify whether there are any weaknesses in internal controls that would create what we call a significant deficiency or a material weakness. And a significant deficiency is a design flaw in the internal controls that would allow an error to go undetected in the ordinary course of business. And a material weakness would be a significant deficiency that would result in a material misstatement to the financial statements. And based upon our analysis of the internal control structure, the segregation of duties, and our testing of the control features, we did not identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. That's the conclusion that you all want to hear. The second reason we do all that is it allows us to define our tests on the year-end financial statements. And we do those using substantive testing, which is made up of test of details and analytic review. Test of details is where we drill down into account balances and look at the transactions that make up that account balance and compare those transactions to supporting documentation such as invoices, bank statements, any other item that may have been produced by an outside party and received by the city. The analytic review procedures is where we compare the current year to the prior year, the current year to the budget, looking for unusual items or relationships that we can't explain. We also compare balance sheet accounts to income statement accounts. And if we find something that we don't anticipate or that we can't explain, then we'll perform more test of details to drill down into those specific accounts to determine whether or not the financial statements are prepared in accordance with general accepted accounting principles. And the first item on the table of contents here is the Independent Auditor's Report. And that is on our letterhead. And basically it is a 2-page standardized report. And the top of the second page is what's most important. And it states that in our opinion, the financial statements are prepared in accordance with general accepted accounting principles and applied on a consistent basis. That is referred to as an unmodified opinion, or in layman's term, a clean opinion. And that is also what you want to hear. So that's what our report looks like. I'm going to scroll back up to the table of contents, and the financial statement package is made up of our audit opinion and then the management's discussions and analysis. That's prepared by the town management and is their perspective of how the year went in the outlook for the upcoming year. Then we have the basic financial statements, and I'm not sure the level of knowledge of governmental accounting of the folks that I'm speaking with tonight, but the government-wide financial statement is on a full accrual basis, just like a regular business would produce. A Apple, a Microsoft, a General Mills, or General Motors. We accrue all of the assets, including the long-term assets, capital assets, and reflect any long-term liabilities. The governmental funds financial statements is a unique financial statements that are for governments, and they are looking at the sources and uses of funds. So we only report the revenues that were received during the year or within 90 days after year end, and we show all the expenditures within the year or within 90 days after year end. And so, for example, an expenditure on a capital asset, an infrastructure item in the government-wide financial statements would not go through the income statement, but be reflected as capital assets on the balance sheet. On the governmental funds financial statement, those expenditures are reflected as expenses. So it shows the users what monies were available and how those monies were used by the city. The proprietary fund is the business type activity, the utilities, if you will, and those are also on a full accrual basis. The rest of the financial statement package is primarily budgetary comparison schedules, where we have compared each individual fund's actual results to the budgetary results and then show the variances. So any user, the council or anyone else can go through there and look and see how the town or the city has done for the fiscal year in 19 in relationship to the budget that they anticipated. And then the final compliance section is simply the state highway report that is required to be in the audit. And that's the audit package itself. We also issue a letter. It is called a those charged with governance letter, a required communication. We are required to communicate in writing whether or not certain issues occurred during the audit. For example, if we had disagreements with management, we would disclose what those disagreements were in this letter, or we would disclose that we did not have any. And this letter is a clean letter. It basically states that we did not have any specific item that we're required to communicate. We did not have any significant accounting problems. We did not have any disagreements with management. We did have a couple of audit entries that I'll go over here in just a moment, and we have to disclose those. And we are not aware of management communicating with other auditors during the process of the audit. What that comes from is opinion shopping back 15, 20 years ago, whereas if a city had an argument with the CPA firm, they would just go talk to other CPAs until they found one that agreed with their accounting, and then they would change to them. And if we're aware of that, we have to communicate that, and that did not happen as well. So we really have nothing to communicate that we're required to. We did make a couple of journal entries to the books and records in the financial statement preparation. Nothing unusual, nothing that would lead the council to believe that the records were prepared incorrectly. The first entry is simply recording non-cash depreciation on the business type activities and the governmental funds activities. The second entry, it's rather large, but it's just broken down to a lot of accounts. All that is the pension liability for the FPPA. That comes out once a year. And so that's not something that the town will record on a regular basis throughout the year. The FPPA comes out with an audit report of their unfunded liability, and then every city and town and county that participates then has to report their proportionate share on their financial statements, and that's what this journal entry is doing. The next one is simply a reclassification, reclassifying the fund balance to the different unreserved and assigned accounts for financial statement purposes, and those are all done based upon year-end numbers. And then a very small $2,500 entry that we made just to balance things out. So all in all, there were no adjustments as though something was recorded incorrectly and needed to be fixed. These are all simply year-end closing entries that would be done on a normal annual basis. All in all, the audit went well, even though we were in the middle of a pandemic and everything has gone to virtual. But we're set up for that. All of our audit processes are electronic, and we have a secure portal that we can pass documents back and forth with all of our clients in. And so we were able to operate, albeit a little bit slower because of the pandemic, but we were able to continue through the audit and complete it in good fashion. I would like to tell the council that everything that we asked for, we were provided in a timely basis. We felt as though we had full transparency in the books and records, and that everything that was provided was open provided, and we never felt like we were kept from anything at all. So that was real good, and I appreciate Tobecca, all of her help and her staff's help in getting through this. As you can see from the table of contents, this is an 84-page document with very detailed footnotes and a lot of information that comes from a lot of different places to be able to pull together into this financial statement. And thank you for all of your help and your staff's help through this process. Are there any questions?
Council, do we have any questions for Mr. Hinkle? Are there any staff questions or comments? Denise?
Yeah, I just would like to make a comment that I want to recognize Becca for doing this during a pandemic. It was a challenging time, I know, and she got it done on time. And as you heard Jim state, she was always available. She was working. We talked a lot. She worked a lot of hours to make this, and I want to recognize both Becca and her staff for going above and beyond to get this done during a pandemic. So good job.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Becca, and pass that on to your staff as well, please. We appreciate your work and your good efforts on this. Does anyone else have comments or questions for Mr. Hinkle or for Becca? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the 2019 audit as presented. Mayor Pro Tem, I see your hand now. You're muted. You're muted, Nancy.
Damn it, who's got the bingo on that? I also wanted to say that after my 3 years now on council and listening to these, we've seen steady improvement in our audits over the past few years. And it's so encouraging not only to see finance department, just come up with such a good audit this year and improve over time, but our other departments seem to be doing that as well. So thanks. I just want to echo the kudos to our finance department. And then I do want to make a motion to approve the 2019 audit as presented.
I'll
second that.
Do we have any discussion? I don't see an interest in a discussion. Let's go ahead and vote then. All in favor of the motion to accept the audit, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Okay. Okay, great. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hinkle.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much,
your
and I
attendance.
appreciate this time.
Okay,
Thank you,
great.
Jim.
Okay, great. Okay, the next item of business is resolution number 3120, a resolution to retain historically significant sections of the Hiawatha Gardens building for future use as a transportation center and community hub. And the resolution was authored by Mayor Pro Tem Fortune, so we'll begin with giving her the floor.
Sure, thank you. And I'm not in mute, yay. A couple of weeks ago, we discussed this at some length, and the majority of council asked me to capture what we had discussed into a resolution, which is what you see this evening. And I'd like to say that in accordance with the recommendation from the Hiawatha Garden Task Force, we wanted in that resolution to say that we would retain and restore the historically significant portions of Hiawatha Gardens. And that was also requested by staff that we make a decision such as that to move forward so that other cascading decisions could be made. You need to make decisions so that other decisions can be made. And this was one that had to will initiate several other decisions. Since then, there's been a number of questions and concerns that I think actually the resolution does adequately address or does not lock us into things that some people have expressed concern over. First of all, it does not dictate that the Hiawatha Gardens go into the historic district. It does ask that it be considered at the appropriate time. There is a process for entering something into the historic district. So that's not yet a done deal. It sets a deadline of 9 months for an economically feasible plan. So it's still possible that the Hiawatha Gardens Task Force could say it's not economically feasible to retain this. But I do want to say that over the years that this issue is being looked at, a lot of that time has been spent gathering a lot of facts and information and courses of action. And the task force has assessed all those facts and hence their recommendation. It was not, the information was not cherry picked to come up with a specific conclusion. There really was an effort to arrive at an objective recommendation, and that's what we see before us tonight. And too bad I can't read my writing. Oh, and another concern was why is it taking so long? You know, it shouldn't take this long. Two comments on that. One is that we did put it on pause until the TMMP, the Transportation Mobility Plan, was concluded. Then we had almost a complete turnover of staff that needed to be brought up to date. And about shortly after that, COVID hit. So we did lose a lot of time in that time period in order to coalesce all these facts and proceed with a recommendation or a course of action, or a plan of action, I should say. So with that, I'm prepared to answer questions that folks might have. I think it's pretty straightforward. Yeah, so that's what I have to say so far.
I guess now would be a good time to present questions for Mayor Pro Tem Fortune, and we can kind of enter into a discussion, I guess. Anyone like to lead off with a question or comment? Councilor Wolf?
I'm kind of uncomfortable with section 3. I'm not entirely sure that I'm interested in a partnership with the COG with respect to this building. And if so, you know, would there be strings attached or what? So just to have some unknown people on some future task force initiating discussions and or negotiating with the COG, I'm not comfortable with that. If someone's going to talk to the COG, I'd like it to be Jeff Parker or some specially chosen person with negotiating skills. And I'd like to know what terms, because in the past, we've sometimes had problems where council is so vague when we ask staff to, you know, do things like talk to Colorado Springs about the incline, and then before we know it, there are decisions being made that are policy decisions that seem to be made by staff, or staff sort of leads. Anyway, I don't like paragraph. I don't like section 3 for that reason, and I'd be open to having someone talk me out of that, but I have concerns.
If I could, I'll read the section out of the tax incentive agreement that talks about the $500,000. And it's to assist with the property acquisition, design, construction, and related costs of selected options. The parties' individual contributions are expected to be at least $500,000 each. If the Hiawatha Gardens site is selected as a site, the current market appraised value of the land on which the parking facility is constructed at the Hiawatha Gardens site shall be credited toward the city's minimum contribution reference in the previous sentence. Hence, I would suggest, and that either party could have veto power over that, how the $500,000 that the COG is putting up could be expended. But I think that whatever, that we could in fact get together and agree to a way forward. So I have great deal of comfort in section 3, that we could work together on how that 500, and none of, I also want to say that all of this is subject to approval by council, ultimate approval by council. So I'm not worried about the task force engaging in discussions to move things along. I don't think it's a negotiation at this point. I just think it's a plan of action, a potential plan of action.
Then why do we need to leave it in there?
We don't, accept its council's intent potentially to tap into that 500,000 for this purpose.
Yeah, you don't have to say that, do you?
No, we don't have to say any of this.
That's a good point. Well, anyway, that's why I'm uncomfortable with it. And I'm not sure when you were rattling off all those words, it sounded like you were reading from something.
I
Is that
was
something-
I was reading from the tax incentive agreement that was entered into a couple of years ago with the COG.
Thank you.
Sorry, I could have put that in the, as an attachment. It didn't. I just
No
dug it
problem.
up right before the meeting.
Yeah, no problem. It was very impressive.
Yay.
Question from Counselor Chandler or a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Fortune, for taking the time to put this together. Since our last council session where this came up as a topic, I've talked to numerous residents in the city, and they have some, of course, a plethora of wonderful ideas about Hiawatha Gardens. So what I would like to see happen in section 1, and I know it sounds minor, but I don't want to think of Hiawatha Gardens as only a transportation hub. I think it makes sense that it would be a transportation hub, but I would like to see that sentence say, so let's see, with the goal to establish it for community use, including but not limited to a multimodal transportation hub. So that's one of the things we can think about doing with it, but it's not one of the only things that we can think about doing it. And I think that kind of addresses section 3 also with regards to tapping the COG $500,000 so that we don't assume that the COG is trying to look at Hiawatha Gardens just to be a transportation hub for the COG parking problem. So I would like to suggest that change.
Okay, quite honestly, that's how I would have interpreted that anyway. I think I'm not seeing where it substantively changes the intent, but if that is,
Yeah,
that's
so
fine with me. I mean, I don't see where it changes anything one way or the other really,
Well,
but if it makes it clear for you.
well, right now it says establish it for community use and as a multimodal transportation hub, meaning that it will be one or the other or both. But if we could just soften that language to say community use and including but not limited to a multimodal transportation hub, it gives the community more opportunity to give us input on it being other things than just a multimodal transportation hub that solves the COG's parking problem. So I think that's been part of the issue about
Okay.
the COG being a player here.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine. It has to be, I think we do need to include certainly multimodal transportation hub in your language says that, and the community really wanted it as for some sort of community use. So I'm fine with changing that language there. I don't have a problem with that.
That was my only suggestion. Thank you so much.
So just if anyone makes a motion, I would just include that as an amendment to the resolution.
I believe Mr. Shada had his hand up a minute or so ago. Mr. Shada, did you?
So Judith, is essentially your intent to basically change in section 1 that last and as and or?
I would like to read establish it for community use, including but not limited to a multimodal transportation hub.
Thank you. Thank you. I was trying to write down your thing and that's perfect. Thank you so much.
Other comments at this point? Okay, if not, several weeks ago when this topic had come up, we had, I think it was a 4-3 vote. I think it might be a good idea to just kind of go around the table kind of quickly and see where we stand. If we could do that. Counselor Wolf?
Oh, thank you. It just occurred to me that I have a question for Nancy, if I may. If we do not vote on this, if this does not pass tonight, does this slow anything down? And if so, what and how?
I don't have a good answer for that at this point. the thing that I think is important is that we need to start moving on it. And it needs, I think staff needs council's direction for that this is something that we want to go forward with. And the longer we leave that building sitting empty, the more prone it is to deterioration. So I think staff needs something like this, a stake in the ground, so to speak, to really move forward and start taking action. And I do think that the 9-month thing is important because we can't just go forever on this.
May I ask her another question?
Go ahead, Julie. Yeah.
So would you be comfortable with a friendly amendment or would this amendment feel friendly if we modify section 3 to say something like at some point in the future, council will designate specific individuals to initiate discussion, blah, 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 the rest of the sentence, instead of identifying this task force as the group that will initiate that discussion? Would that allow you to feel like we're moving forward without causing problems?
I think it is problematic when council gets too involved in more operational things, actions.
You think negotiating a $500,000 deal is operational?
I think the deal is already negotiated. The $500,000 is how it's spent.
There's a lot
Again,
of details.
We have veto power over anything, so the COG can't put anything over on us. I know you're concerned about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see it as a problem. I think discussions are important, and if it starts at at the task force or at a staff officer level, I think that we just need to start communicating and moving forward. And it may, but it ultimately, that 500,000, you can say, well, it would be anyway, that the $500,000 will not be spent without council's ultimate approval on it. So I don't think it's a negotiation at this point.
Okay, thank you for explaining.
Thank you. Right. Mr. Bremner, what are your thoughts?
Well, I toured the building last week and frankly, it's a wreck. I don't really see any hope for the building itself. It's in the floodplain and it's got lots of problems. And I've looked over some of the documents trying to understand, some of the history, because I got access to all the documents. And so I'm generally not in favor of the moving forward with it.
Right, thank you.
And I've also got several emails from constituents that are in Ward 3 who have also expressed that view as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilor Wilbrook, did you have your hand up or?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks. And thanks, Nancy, for the extra work that you did on this. I do appreciate the effort. I would like to see us take a pause on this right now and look at some of the things that are outlined in some of the emails that we've gotten from constituents. I think that it would do us good to take some suggestions that have been put forward about really taking a look again in a different way, probably an expensive way, but if these are multi-million-dollar projects, both Hiawatha Gardens and the Carnegie Library, both were in the match legislation. And I think it would help the match board too if we did a more comprehensive survey or some other, I mean, that seems to be the only way that you can get a less biased approach. And that's not to say that I don't appreciate the passion that people have for both of these projects, but I think that too often we move forward too fast. And that's probably got a lot of people in the audience laughing because it's taken a long time, but we're in the middle of a pandemic. And now we're trying to make these decisions about multi-million-dollar projects and how to prioritize them. And I think we're kind of doing it in a vacuum. And I was surprised. For some reason, I thought this was coming on the agenda in November. That must be a surprise that only I had. But it's here tonight. I would like for us to pause this and figure out how we get a better sampling that matches sort of the emails that we've gotten in the last week. That helps us move forward on both the Carnegie Library, Hiawatha. I mean, we could even toss City Hall in there because that's still a problem. These are these big three projects. And I think we're asking the match board to make some decisions. We're gonna ultimately take all of these issues to the voters, right? Because whether we take out a loan to do them or whether we bond or however we do it, we ultimately end up on a ballot, either a special election or a regular election. And I think that this kind of groundwork just makes it easier to do that. So whether or not this groundwork, these surveys are something that I personally agree with, or I think my ward agrees with, I think the more prepared you are when you go to the voters and ask them to finance any one of these things, the better off we'll all be. And this is, I'm still in the same place I was when we first talked about this. I have a lot of issues with this building because basically now we're saying, yeah, we want to save it, but we don't exactly know how or what for. So I just think that taking a pause in a pandemic, even though it's been a long time for both of these projects, I understand that. But one of my things that I said at the beginning of COVID was I don't want us to move on these really big things because there's a lot of uncertainty right now. And it just feels wrong to me to move on it tonight. Doesn't mean that in 2 weeks or 2 months or early next year or even later next year, I will feel the same way about it. And in the meantime, I know Boulder does surveys and Boulder's got a lot of money, but for a multi-million-dollar project, maybe we ought to look at a better way to get the community involved instead of asking them to come to a community meeting, which is great. And we've done that. I think we need more work on this. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Chandler, next, please.
I really respect all the comments from everyone. This is a big issue. I think, and I respect what Councilor Wolbrick had to say. What I have to say about that is the Carnegie Library is on pause right now, just by the fact that we have found a place to house the library in the short term while we move ahead, and we don't have to make any immediate decisions until we have more information. As far as the City Hall, there are some immediate things that are going to have to be looked at in 2021. However, there are some things we can put on hold. My concern about Hiawatha Gardens is if we continue to hit the pause button, we're just signing the death warrant for any potential historical significant use of any parts of the building that can be restored. And I'd like to think that the Hiawatha Gardens Task Force 3, I think it's number 3 now, can move ahead and look at all the data, because we've gotten some new data now from the last meeting regarding certain sections, to come up with to tell council yes or no, is this going to be a workable thing? I think the citizens really spoke to us when they said they'd like to have us try to restore the historical portions. And we do have $500,000 to use at our disposal from the COG. I'm not saying it should necessarily be a transportation hub for parking for the COG railway, but I think that we do have some funds we could be using. So I would not want to hit the pause button again, because I think if we hit the pause button again, we're just signing the death warrant of that building. So I'd like to see us move forward on it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilor. Mr. Shada.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'm in favor of Nancy's resolution. I believe that 9 months is a good period of time to get us to look at all the alternatives. I'm particularly interested in essentially how this property, I'm not interested in just a silo project where we're only focusing on this building. I guess to me, I see the Hiawatha Task Force as something that looks at this particular property, possibly the potential for this building. You know, I was on city council when the city garage, you know, at the BAC was something that we had to get out of because we couldn't even pull our equipment into the building. And there were all sorts of people who wanted to tear the building down in the whole 9 yards. And I'm not saying this building is in the same shape as that other building. That's not my point. My point is that I think 9 months is a legitimate period of time to kind of move ahead and come up with a, you know, a plan and have it submitted to the community and to the council, and we make our decision, you know, in 9 months. So I'm comfortable moving forward with Councilwoman Nancy Fortune's resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Shada. Mayor Pro Tem, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Just to reiterate the point that the intent is to come up with an action plan, and there will be more opportunities for community input. So I agree with Judith that hitting a pause is just the wrong time to hit a pause. We need to take action and move on it. So that's all.
Thank you. Okay, for my 2 cents, as I've mentioned before, I think there's very little that recommends trying to save the building. I think it's beyond hope. It's me personally. It's actually, I mean, you know, Chuck Murphy, who was the guy who restored the spa building, rebuilt the Cliff House, and did the Barker House in 515 Manitou Avenue, the very building that Mr. Shada spoke to. I mean, he's really a master preservationist. And yet he's pulled me aside a number of times and said that the Hiawatha Gardens building is structurally beyond hope. I mean, regardless of how much money you throw at it, I think it's a bad investment. And this comes at a time when we're challenged financially. Manitou's always been challenged financially, but now, especially with COVID, I've got deep concerns. So I guess I'm the real Grinch on this, but you know, I look at the work the task force has done thus far, and after 3 or 4 years of getting together, we don't seem to be nearly as far as we should be. I realize there were interruptions, but I'm discouraged by it. I don't think there's really much hope for the building. I think we're just spinning our wheels. I would support something that like Mayor, that Councilor Wolbert mentioned. You know, some sort of broader community survey where we get some more feedback, because I do feel that the surveys that were done by the task force were pretty one-sided and self-referential. I don't think they were objective efforts to really get good data. So that's basically my 2 cents. I think however this goes, this is going to be a continuing process. So I would look forward to community involvement and community comment in the future. Councilor Wolf.
Thank you. I wanted to make a brief statement based on so many emails that I've gotten personally, as well as through the city addressed to all of City Council. And that point is that what we're doing now, I believe, or the reason I'm going to vote in favor of this is I agree there should be broader community input, but I want that community input to be provided after we have more information. So if it turns out this is going to be, you know, a $30 million job and we can't get more than 5 cents in grants, we may decide not to do it. But I want to get more information before we just diss the whole thing and scrape the building. And that's why I'll be voting in favor of it, not because I've made any final determinations, because we still don't have the numbers.
Good points. Thank you. Have any further discussion? I guess not. Mayor Pro Tem, there were several modifications to your resolution. If you could refresh our memory before we move forward with a vote.
Sure. Can I make a motion then with the amendment in there? I move to approve resolution number 3120, a resolution to retrain historically significant sections of Hiawatha Gardens building for future use as a transportation center and community hub, but amend section 1 to say the Hiawatha Gardens Task Force will be reconvened to investigate and implement the restoration of historic aspects of Hiawatha Gardens with the goal to establish it for community use, including but not limited to a multimodal transportation hub.
Second.
Further discussion? Last call. Okay. In that case, let's go ahead and vote. All in favor, vote aye. Raise your hand. We have 4 votes. All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. Nay. Okay, motion passes 4-3. It's with Councilors Wolf, Chandler, Shada, and Mayor Pro Tem Fortune voting in favor. Okay, thank you. And I did want to mention, I do appreciate the work that Mayor Pro Tem Fortune did. I think she did make an effort to make a compromise on this in something that would be useful. So hopefully we'll go forward with this effectively. Okay, so we've come to receive or act on council correspondence. Who would like to go first? No takers? Okay, Councilor Wolf?
I just received some emails from folks who have expressed concern about the expense and how will we pay for it regarding the Hiawatha Garden building. I also received some personal emails asking about the larger plan, what, if any, larger plan is there for the Hiawatha area? And I just indicated so far there's nothing official. And I believe that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilor Brunmer?
Yeah, I received several emails personally as well regarding the Hiawatha Gardens, and they were all in favor of the vote that I took, which was to not go forward with it. Mainly because it's, as the mayor expressed, I think it's a lost cause, and we need to concentrate our resources on the library, because I don't think we can feasibly do both. And there's so many problems with that Hiawatha Gardens. Regarding the incline fire, I've had a number of comments from citizens, and they're generally lauding our efforts to, first of all, identify the homeless illegal camp. I'm not going to use homeless because that's politically charged. I want to use illegal encampments because any encampment in the city limits is illegal. So we need to identify those illegal encampments, clean them up, and enforce so that people don't return. And I'm new to the city council, and I wasn't aware that there's been a program since 2016, and I've since become aware of it thanks to Michael Mayo, who sent me a series of emails over the weekend over the efforts that they've undertaken since about 2016. And there's a program called LEAP, L-E-E-P, which is locate, and I forget what the other ones are, enforce. But the idea is to, like I said, to first of all, locate the camps, clean them up, remove them, and then enforce to make sure that people don't return to these campsites. And on Monday, I went out with Officer Gary Johnson, and I showed him some illegal encampments up off the bar trail, higher than where the fire started. And I was a little bit shocked because I asked him, didn't you know about this encampment where the fire started? Because it was huge. And some of my friends have told me that they've reported it, but he was unaware of it. he wasn't aware of that encampment. And there were maybe 4 or 5 collapsed tents in there and just a ton of garbage. Most of it burned up in the fire. But I was just shocked that he was not aware of that encampment. So hopefully we can get ahead of this problem. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, Councillor Chandler.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Fortune, for authoring the resolution. I got several responses about Hiawatha Gardens, and I can honestly tell you it was very mixed. If I had to put a number on it, it's probably 50-50. I think most of the input that I got was, you know, whatever you do with Hiawatha Gardens, please don't just make it a paved parking lot. I think the citizens of Manitou want to see us have a little bit more creativity about that area and make something that's a symbol for our town. It was very mixed. I did want to thank also Becca in the finance department for the audit that had to have been rigorous. So thank you for that. And I just want to report an incident that happened today at the Beehive. Several of us are starting to take shifts over there, and today was my first shift, and we were able to de-escalate a very volatile situation with a homeless individual with mental health issues, and we were able to get him what he needed today, and we were able to avoid having to involve the police, the fire, or other emergency responses in this town. So it was really gratifying to see it working and to have that happen. I reported that back to Chief Churchill that we were able to get this individual some help. And so I just want to let you know that, you know, sometimes it's just one individual, but thank goodness there was a great team today to be there for to help this individual out. That's all I've got. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Shada, do you have anything?
I don't have anything. Everybody's already reported my viewpoints thus far. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councillor Walbrook?
Thank you. Same. Everybody has covered, I think, most of the correspondence that all of us have gotten so far this week. And Judith, thanks for that update on the Beehive and all the work that you and others are putting into that as volunteers. I do appreciate that.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Sure. I also want to say how thrilled I am that the partnerships that have been put in place and on the Beehive. I just think that that's one of the most exciting initiatives that the city has partnered on in a while. So thanks to Councilwoman Chandler for that. I think it's wonderful. Secondly, I was at the URA Friday morning, and they are planning a dedication ceremony for the little parklet down at the Arch. And if you haven't seen that with the eagle and the rocky fence and rocky tree on the fence thing there, it's really beautiful. They've done a very nice job with it. So go take a look at that. And lastly, we did get an email about how we should well, in my opinion, more appropriately handle Columbus Day in the future. And I think that we've kind of missed the boat this year, unfortunately. But I think if we could put that on our agenda for some time, maybe next spring, to look at so that we're prepared for next October 12th, that would be a very good idea. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's see, I really don't have anything to report in terms of normal correspondence. I will mention that the work session next week will be devoted largely to the budget. So if you do have questions between now and then, certainly feel free to reach out to Denise or Becca or to both of them. Denise has offered to meet one-on-one with any council member who would like to have that opportunity. And I think that she also speaks for Becca. We would like to get, and staff would like to get your questions as soon as possible. If you could let them know, just email them so that they have an opportunity to research them adequately and provide good answers by the time of next week's meeting. So I think let's try and be respectful of staff's time and give them an opportunity to do their best work. One other question was mentioned to me that some cities do a 2-year budget cycle. In other words, they'll do try to craft their budget 2 years into the future, and then they do periodic evaluations and amend as necessary. But in some respects, that might be useful for planning. So I think as we're looking through the budget in preparation for next week, that might be something we want to have in the back of our mind. Would a 2-year budget cycle work more effectively for Manitou? I ask you to think about that, kick the idea around. That's all I've got. So let's move on to the city administrator's report. Mr. Cheney?
Yeah, just to let council know that we had a large tree in Shriver come down, probably from the winds a couple of weeks ago. It was leaning on another large tree, so we had emergency crew come in and take it down. Only half of it, we were able to save the other half. And then we found some undermining under the dirt there from the creek to the pond. So we're going to be working on that because of some pipe leaking, I think, from that circulation pipe. So just letting you know. So yes, a large tree did come down, but wasn't done purposely. We discovered it, and it was definitely a big hazard if it would have fell. So that's all I have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Denise?
Yeah, a couple of things. I want to recognize the water crew this weekend. As you saw by the press releases, they were out almost all day Sunday, and then they had an early morning again Monday. So some of them got very little sleep over the weekend, and I really want to recognize them for all that they did in making sure that people got their water. So great job to them. Budget meeting tomorrow night for the public. So we are doing an in-person meeting. They have to RSVP, all of those things. Right now, we only have one person signed up. So if anybody in the public would like to partake and learn more about the budget, it is tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, and you sign up online for that. We're limiting it to, I believe, only 10 people, and then we'll do one on Zoom the following week. Becker's meeting was last week. I attended that. It was very well attended, lots of questions. So the Becker's Lane meeting there was a public meeting last week, and that went fairly well, or went very well. Roy continues to work on the TMMP. He has a group that's working on that. And as you know, in the budget meeting, he did state he's read 5 books on parking, and he truly has read 5 books and knows parking pretty much inside and out. So he and his team are doing a great job really trying to figure out how we're going to manage parking long-term. And it's not parking, it's mobility. So it's really looking at the mobility of the city, and I want to recognize him for that. COVID-19. All of you know that COVID-19 cases are going up. So we're going to be looking at a city of what does that look like? We're enhancing our communication, wearing masks, talking to the businesses, really starting another robust communication plan of how we're going to get, remind people to wear masks, social distancing, and then the city, how we're going to protect staff and anybody that comes in, and what does that look like? So, the thing with COVID-19 is if we get a couple of people with COVID-19 in the city, we're so thin that services are going to be cut substantially. So we are really looking tomorrow at the department head meeting of what that looks like and how we keep going. And then the whole city, how do we convince everybody to wear masks all the time? I was downtown this weekend, went down one time, masks were not used as much, and then went down another time and there were masks everywhere. But really get that word out and reminding the public to wear masks, wear masks, wear masks. And then the chief is working. I know he's been talking to several of you. He is working on the illegal camps, and we'll have something back to you in the next couple of weeks of a plan of how to move forward with, I think, several options. So I wanted to announce that. I think that's all I have at this time.
Thank you, Denise. Okay, that leaves us just with the time to adjourn. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Here, motion is second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Okay, good night, everybody. Have a nice evening and a good week. Take care.
Good evening.